Hello, my name is Paul Granger, and I'm the president of New Vision Civic League. I wanted to take just a few minutes to share where we are as New Vision Civic League and what we can expect in the year to come. Now, some of you might not know me. I've actually lived in the Fairmount community since 2008. For a long time, I was over on Fairmount Avenue, right by Richmond Cycling Corps. For the last few years, I've been over here at 20th and R Street. And in that time, I've had the privilege of being a part of New Vision Civic League. I remember my first meeting. Before the meeting was done, Mary Thompson had already put me in charge of a special committee. And I've been grateful for that space ever since, even though that time caught me off guard. New Visions is a long history of really investing in this community, really being what its tagline says it is, neighbors helping neighbors. And so as we come into 2021, we want to continue in that history and in that space. We want to continue to impact the neighborhood. We want to continue to be neighbors helping neighbors. It's hard to know what that looks like, though, because we don't know what's ahead for 2021, and we barely even know what happened in 2020. And that's been my presidency. I became president of New Visions right before the pandemic really got going in our area. And so I have never been president of an in-person meeting. All of our meetings have been on Zoom. And we've had some great gatherings in that space. But prior to me becoming president and over the course of this past year, what our spaces have looked like, what those meetings have been, and who has attended them has seen a lot of changes. And that's true for our neighborhood as well. Our neighborhood has changed a lot in the past 5 years, past 10 years. And that leads to many questions of what our neighborhood is, where it's heading, who are our neighbors, and so what does New Vision Civic League look like? And these are hard questions. I had a lot of plans on how to address these questions when I came in, and many of those plans hinged on being in person with people, having direct connections. And so while some of those have paused and some of those have changed, it's still important for me to think through what it looks like for us to move forward. There are three things that I want to point out as we're looking at 2021. One, I think it's important for us to know who our neighbors are and what voices might not be heard. We have a lot of neighbors represented in our community, and the demographics of that have changed significantly, especially as housing prices have gone up. But not only do we have neighbors who have recently purchased, close to a $500,000 home, we also have neighbors that are unsheltered, that don't have a consistent home, that may not even have consistent shelter. Both of them are neighbors. Both of them are a part of this community that we call home. Both of them are part of that tagline, neighbors helping neighbors. But depending on who someone is, depending on their experiences, depending on their resources, their capacity to have their voice heard can either be elevated or limited. And so one thing I want us to think about as we're moving forward is how can we make sure that all of our neighbors are included? All of our neighbors are heard. All of our neighbors are valued. All of our neighbors are cared for. And that's a very hard task during a pandemic when you can barely get outside and you can't get close to people. So we have some challenges ahead for us, but that's going to be important moving forward, because when a neighborhood changes, one of the worst effects of that is people can get forgotten or neglected. People can actually get hurt in the midst of change and not even be seen. That's not who we are, and that's not what we're going to do. Coming off of that, we're going to need to think about what is important for our neighborhood. What are the issues that really impact our geographic space? What are the things that we really need to be working together to move forward towards? Now, this is something that New Visions has been known for. It started because they saw some issues around blight in the community. They joined together and they pushed forward. And a lot of the change that we've seen in the community is a result of some of those really direct and passionate pushes. What are the things that are impacting our community today? What are the things that matter? They're going to be small things and they're going to be large things. But we need to get better at being able to not just name those, but rally around those. I think of things like a year ago, Camp Kathy was just outside of our neighborhood. And while it wasn't in our neighborhood, we had a number of neighbors that actually lived at Camp Kathy. For those that don't know, Camp Kathy was the tent city that was set up just outside of the property of the jail. And there are a number of folks who were unsheltered who found shelter and community in that space. And then at the start of the pandemic, it was torn down. And a lot of people didn't know where they were going to stay after that. Even though that was geographically outside of us, many of our neighbors were impacted by it because we have many unsheltered neighbors in our community. What could be our response to something like that? How do we rally around and engage in an issue that affects our neighbors? So that's the second piece. How do we learn to discern what's important to our community and how do we rally around it? Which leads to the third thing. In order for us to rally, there needs to be an us to rally. When I became president, we were at a time of transition in pretty much all of the formal roles, and we were not able to hold elections to refill those spots. So in a lot of ways, we don't really have a formalized team for New Vision Civic League. It's the first time in history I think we've had that. And the only reason we've been able to continue like that is because we've been in this weird pandemic mode where we're just hosting Zoom meetings. But in order for us to be able to move forward and make an impact, we're going to need people that are willing to invest. Now, it's a hard thing to do when you have limited time and this doesn't pay anything. We're doing this out of the goodness of our heart and love for our community and each other. But the more that we can find people that can step into that role, the more that we're going to be able to move forward. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, you matter. Your voice matters. What you're passionate about matters. But being a part of a formalized community matters as well, because the more of us that join together, the stronger we can become to stand for what's important for our community, to be neighbors helping neighbors. So I want you to think of what your capacity is for this coming year. How much time you might be able to invest, whether it's an hour a month or an hour a week. The extent to which you're able to invest, whether it's participating in the monthly meeting or taking care of all the financial pieces or being the one that goes to city meetings. They're virtual now, so it makes it a lot easier, right? There's different ways you can serve, and you have specific gifts and passions that can lend themselves to this space. I don't want to push people into things that they aren't going to want to do. I want people to be given the opportunity to thrive within what they are already gifted and passionate around. So think about how you can give back to the community through New Visions. There's a lot of opportunities for that. So how do we hear the voices of all of our neighbors? How do we recognize what is important for our neighborhood? And how do we rally together to make that happen? Those pieces are still going to be tricky when there's so many questions around 2021. We're probably going to continue to meet online until it's safe for all of our neighbors to be able to be in person. It's probably going to be hard to do any functional things like trash pickups and things like that when we are still limited in how large groups can be. So it's hard to say how we do all of this, but just because we don't know how we're going to do it doesn't mean that we should. I need you to be a part of this. I can't do this by myself. I can't do this with a handful of people. I need you, all of us, to come together and be neighbors helping neighbors. So I am making myself available to hear your voice. I encourage you to reach out to those that won't see this, neighbors that don't have internet, that don't have phones, that don't have computers. You hear their voice and then share what they have to share. Let's work together to do this. If you have ideas, requests, questions, concerns, reach out. We are going to continue to meet first Saturday of each month at 9 a.m. on Zoom. That link will go out the week prior or days prior. And, you know, at the end of the day, whether or not you directly engage with New Visions, you still can be a neighbor helping neighbors. So think about who's in your immediate vicinity. Know the names of the people in your block. Know the ways you can come alongside them and serve. Neighbors that you don't know their names, learn their names. If you aren't able to learn their names, say hi and wave. There are small and large ways that we can love our neighbors, but because there are at least small ones, we can always be doing something. So let's love our neighbors. Let's be neighbors helping neighbors. And let's authentically consider, how we can continue the beautiful history of New Vision Civic League this year and beyond. Thanks for being a neighbor. Appreciate you. And I hope you have a great year.